The princess told the Count that she would be delighted, and only begged him to stay a little longer at Anna Semyonovna's, and Ilya Andreitch departed. In spite of the uneasy glances flung at her by Princess Maria, who wanted to talk to Natasha by herself, Mademoiselle Bourienne would not leave the room, and persisted in keeping up a conversation about Moscow entertainments and theaters. Natasha felt offended by the delay in the entry, by her father's nervousness, and by the constrained manner of the princess, who seemed to her to be making a favor of receiving her. And then everything displeased her. She did not like Princess Maria. She seemed to her very ugly, affected, and frigid. Natasha suddenly, as it were, shrank into herself, and unconsciously assumed a nonchalant air, which repelled Princess Maria more and more. After 5 minutes of irksome and constrained conversation, they heard the sound of slippered feet approaching rapidly. Princess Maria's face expressed terror. The door of the room opened, and the prince came in a white nightcap and dressing-gown. "Ah, Madame," he began. "Madame, Countess Rostov, if I'm not mistaken. I beg you to excuse me, I didn't know, Madame. As gods above, I didn't know that you were deigning to visit us, and came in to my daughter in this costume. I beg you to excuse me. As gods above, I didn't know." He repeated so unnaturally, with emphasis on the word God, and so unpleasantly, that Princess Maria rose to her feet with her eyes on the ground, not daring to look either at her father or at Natasha. Natasha, getting up and curtsying, did not know either what she was to do. Only Mademoiselle Bourienne smiled agreeably. "I beg you to excuse me. I beg you to excuse me. As gods above, I didn't know," muttered the old man, and looking Natasha over from head to foot, he went out. Mademoiselle Bourienne was the first to recover herself after this apparition, and began talking about the prince's ill health. Natasha and Princess Maria gazed dumbly at one another, and the longer they gazed dumbly at one another without saying what they wanted to say, the more unfavorably each felt disposed to the other. When the Count returned, Natasha showed a discourteous relief at seeing him, and made haste to get away. At that moment she almost hated that stiff, oldish princess, who could put her in such an awkward position, and spend half an hour with her without saying a word about Prince Andrei. "I couldn't be the first to speak of him before that Frenchwoman," thought Natasha. Princess Maria, meanwhile, was tortured by the very same feeling. She knew what she had to say to Natasha, but she could not do it, both because Mademoiselle Bourienne prevented her, and because, she did not know herself why, it was difficult for her to begin to speak of the marriage. The Count was already going out of the room when Princess Maria moved rapidly up to Natasha, took her hand, and, with a heavy sigh, said, "Wait a moment. I want—" Natasha's expression as she looked at Princess Maria was ironical, though she did not know why. "Dear Natalie," said Princess Maria, "do believe how glad I am that my brother has found such happiness." She paused, feeling she was telling a lie. Natasha noticed the pause, and guessed the reason of it. "I imagine, Princess, that it is not now suitable to speak of that," said Natasha, with external dignity and coldness, though she felt the tears rising in her throat. "What have I said? What have I done?" she thought, as soon as she had gone out of the room. They had to wait a long while for Natasha to come to dinner that day. She was sitting in her room, crying like a child, choking and sobbing. Sonia stood over her and kept kissing her on the head. "Natasha, what is it?" she kept saying. "Why need you mind about them? It will pass, Natasha." "No. If only you knew how insulting it was. As though I—" "Don't talk of it, Natasha. It's not your fault, you see, so what does it matter to you?" "Kiss me," said Sonia. Natasha raised her head, and kissing her friend on the lips, pressed her wet face against her. "I can't say. I don't know. It's no one's fault," said Natasha. "It's my fault. But it's all awfully painful. Oh, why doesn't he come?" She went down to dinner with red eyes. Marya Dmitrievna, who had heard how the old prince had received the Rostovs, pretended not to notice Natasha's troubled face, and kept up a loud, jesting conversation at table with the Count and the other guests. Chapter 8. That evening the Rostovs went to the opera, for which Marya Dmitrievna had obtained them a box. Natasha had no wish to go, but it was impossible to refuse after Marya Dmitrievna's kindness, especially as it had been arranged expressly for her. When she was dressed and waiting for her father in the big hall, she looked at herself in the big looking-glass, and saw that she was looking pretty, very pretty. She felt even sadder, but it was a sweet and tender sadness. My God, if he were only here, I wouldn't have any stupid shyness of something as I used to, but in quite a new way, simply. I would embrace him, press close to him, force him to look at me with those scrutinizing, inquisitive eyes, with which he used so often to look at me, and then I would make him laugh, as he used to laugh then. And his eyes, how I see those eyes, thought Natasha. And what does it matter to me about his father and sister? I love no one but him, 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 with that face and those eyes, with his smile, manly yet childlike. No, better not think of him, not think. Forget, utterly forget him for the time. I can't bear this suspense, I shall sob in a minute. And she turned away from the looking-glass, making an effort not to weep. And how can Sonia love Nikolenka so quietly, so calmly, and wait so long and so patiently? She wondered, looking at Sonia, who came in, dressed for the theater with a fan in her hand. No, she's utterly different. I can't. Natasha at that moment felt so softened and moved that to love and know that she was loved was not enough for her. She wanted now at once, to embrace the man she loved, and to speak and hear from him the words of love, of which her heart was full. When she was in the carriage sitting beside her father, and pensively watching the lights of the street lamps flitting by the frozen window, she felt even sadder and more in love, and forgot with whom and where she was going. The Rostovs' carriage fell into the line of carriages, and drove up to the theater, its wheels crunching slowly over the snow. Natasha and Sonia skipped hurriedly out, holding up their dresses. The Count stepped out, supported by the footman, and all three walked to the corridor for the boxes in the stream of ladies and gentlemen going in, and people selling programs. They could hear the music already through the closed doors. "Natasha, your hair," whispered Sonia. The box-opener deferentially and hurriedly slipped before the ladies and opened the door of the box. The music became more distinctly audible at the door, and they saw the brightly lighted rows of boxes, with the bare arms and shoulders of the ladies, and the stalls below, noisy and gay with uniforms. A lady entering the next box looked round at Natasha with an envious, feminine glance. The curtain had not yet risen, and they were playing the overture. Natasha, smoothing down her skirt, went in with Sonia, and sat down, looking round at the brightly lighted tiers of boxes facing them. The sensation she had not experienced for a long while, that hundreds of eyes were looking at her bare arms and neck, suddenly came upon her both pleasantly and unpleasantly, calling up a whole swarm of memories, desires, and emotions connected with that sensation. The two strikingly pretty girls, Natasha and Sonia, with Count Ilya Andreich, who had not been seen for a long while in Moscow, attracted general attention. Moreover, everyone had heard vaguely of Natasha's engagement to Prince Andrei, knew that the Rostovs had been living in the country ever since, and looked with curiosity at the girl who was to make one of the best matches in Russia. Natasha had, so everyone told her, grown prettier in the country, and that evening, owing to her excited condition, she was particularly pretty. She made a striking impression of fullness of life and beauty, together with indifference to everything around her. Her black eyes gazed at the crowd, seeking out no one, while her slender arm, bare to above the elbow, leaned on the velvet edge of the box, and her hand, holding the program, clasped and unclasped in time to the music with obvious unconsciousness. "Look, there's Alenina," said Sonia, "with her mother, isn't it?"
"Heavens, Mikhail Kirillitch is really stouter than ever," said the old count.
"Look, our Anna Mikhailovna in such a cap!"
"The Karagins, Julie and Boris with them. One can see at once they are engaged."
"Drubetskoy has made his offer. To be sure, I heard so today," said Shinshin, coming into the Rostovs' box. Natasha looked in the direction her father was looking in, and saw Julie with diamonds on her thick, red neck. Natasha knew it was powdered, sitting with a blissful face beside her mother. Behind them could be seen the handsome, well-brushed head of Boris, with a smile inclining his ear towards Julie's mouth. He looked from under his brows at the Rostovs, and said something, smiling, to his betrothed. "They are talking about us, about me and himself," thought Natasha, "and he is most likely soothing his fiancée's jealousy of me. They needn't worry themselves. If only they knew how little they matter to me, any one of them." Behind the engaged couple sat Anna Mikhailovna in a green cap, with a face happy in honor of the festive occasion, and devoutly resigned to the will of God. Their box was full of that atmosphere of an engaged couple, which Natasha knew so well and liked so much. She turned away, and suddenly all that had been humiliating in her morning visit came back to her mind. "What right has he not to want to receive me into his family? Ah, better not think about it, not think till he comes back," she said to herself, and began to look about at the faces, known and unknown, in the stalls. In the front of the stalls, in the very center, leaning back against the rail, stood Dolohov, in a Persian dress, with his huge shock of curly hair combed upwards. He stood in the most conspicuous place in the theatre, well aware that he was attracting the attention of the whole audience, and as much at his ease as though he had been alone in his room. The most brilliant young men in Moscow were all thronging about him, and he was obviously the leading figure among them. Count Ilya Andreitch, laughing, nudged the blushing Sonia, pointing out her former admirer.
"Do you recognize him?"
he asked.
"And where has he dropped from?"
said he, turning to Shinshin.
"I thought he had disappeared somewhere."
"He did disappear," answered Shinshin. "He was in the Caucasus, and he ran away from there, and they say he has been acting as minister to some reigning prince in Persia, and there killed the Shah's brother. Well, all the Moscow ladies are wild about him. Dolohov the Persian, that's what does it. Nowadays there's nothing can be done without Dolohov. They do homage to him, invite you to meet him, as if he were a sturgeon," said Shinshin. "Dolohov and Anatole Kuragin have taken all the ladies' hearts by storm." A tall, handsome woman, with a mass of hair and very naked, plump, white arms and shoulders, and a double row of big pearls round her throat, walked into the next box, and was a long while settling into her place, and rustling her thick silk gown. Natasha unconsciously examined that neck and the shoulders, the pearls, the coiffure of this lady, and admired the beauty of the shoulders and the pearls. While Natasha was scrutinizing her a second time, the lady looked round, and meeting the eyes of Count Ilya Andreitch, she nodded and smiled to him. It was the Countess Betsuhov, Pierre's wife. The Count, who knew everyone in society, bent over and entered into conversation with her.
"Have you been here long?"
he began.
I'm coming to kiss your hand. I have come to town on business and brought my girls with me. They say Semyonovna's acting is superb," the Count went on. Count Pyotr Kirillovich never forgot us. Is he here?"
"Yes, he meant to come," said Ellen, looking intently at Natasha. Count Ilya Andreich sat down again in his place.
"Handsome, isn't she?"
he whispered to Natasha. "Exquisite," said Natasha. "One might well fall in love with her." At that moment they heard the last chords of the overture, and the tapping of the conductor's stick. Latecomers hurried to their seats in the stalls, and the curtain rose. As soon as the curtain rose, a hush fell on the boxes and stalls, and all the men, old and young, in their frock coats or uniforms, all the women with precious stones on their bare flesh, concentrated all their attention with eager curiosity on the stage. Natasha, too, began to look at it. Chapter 9. The stage consisted of a boarded floor in the middle, with painted cardboard representing trees at the sides, and linen stretched over the boards at the back. In the middle of the stage there were sitting maidens in red bodices and white skirts. An excessively stout woman in a white silk dress was sitting apart on a low bench with green cardboard fixed on the back of it. They were all singing something. When they had finished their song, the woman in white moved towards the prompter's box, and a man, with his stout legs encased in silk tights, with a plume and a dagger, went up to her and began singing and waving his arms. The man in the tights sang alone, then she sang alone. Then both paused while the music played, and the man fumbled with the hand of the woman in white, obviously waiting for the bar at which he was to begin singing with her. They sang a duet, and everyone in the theater began clapping and shouting, while the man and woman on the stage, supposed to represent lovers, began bowing with smiles and gesticulations. After the country, and in her serious mood, Natasha felt it all grotesque and extraordinary. She could not follow the opera. She could not even listen to the music. She saw nothing but painted cardboard and strangely dressed-up men and women, talking, singing, and moving strangely about in the bright light. She knew what it all was meant to represent, but it was all so grotesquely false and unnatural that she felt alternately ashamed and amused at the actors. She looked about her at the faces of the spectators, seeking in them signs of the same irony and bewilderment that she was feeling herself. But all the faces were watching what was passing on the stage, and expressed nothing but an affected, so Natasha thought, rapture. I suppose it is meant to be like this, thought Natasha. She looked alternately at the rows of pomaded masculine heads in the stalls, and at the naked women in the boxes, especially at her next neighbor, Ellen, who, quite undressed, sat gazing intently, with a quiet and serene smile, at the stage, and basking in the bright light that flooded the theater, and the warm air, heated by the crowd. Natasha began gradually to pass into a state of intoxication she had not experienced for a long while. She lost all sense of what she was, and where she was, and what was going on before her eyes. She gazed and dreamed, and the strangest ideas flashed unexpectedly and disconnectedly into her mind. At one moment the idea occurred to her to leap over the footlights and sing that air the actress was singing. Then she felt inclined to hook her fan into an old gentleman sitting near her, or to bend over to Ellen and tickle her. At a moment when there was a lull on the stage, before the beginning of a song, the door opening to the stalls creaked on the side nearest the Rostovs' box, and there was the sound of a man's footsteps. "Here he is, Kuragin," whispered Shinshin. Countess Betsuhov turned smiling to the newcomer. Natasha looked in the direction of the Countess Betsuhov's eyes, and saw an exceedingly handsome adjutant coming towards their box with a confident, but yet courteous bearing. It was Anatole Kuragin, whom she had seen long before and noticed at the Petersburg ball. He was now wearing an adjutant's uniform, with one epaulette and a shoulder knot. He walked with a jaunty strut, which would have been ridiculous if he had not been so handsome, and if his good-looking face had not expressed such simple-hearted satisfaction and good spirits. Although the performance was going on, he walked lightly, without haste, along the carpeted corridor, holding his scented, handsome head high, and accompanied by a slight clank of spurs and sword. Glancing at Natasha, he went up to his sister, laid his hand in a close-fitting glove on the edge of her box, nodded his head at her, and, bending down, asked her a question with a motion towards Natasha. "Very, very charming," he said, obviously speaking of Natasha. She did not exactly hear the words, but divined them from the movement of his lips. Then he went on to the front row, and sat down beside Dolohov, giving a friendly and careless nudge with his elbow to the man whom other people treated with such punctilio. With a merry wink, he smiled at him, and leaned with his foot against the footlights.
"How like the brother is to his sister," said the Count, "and how handsome they both are."
Shinshin began telling the Count in an undertone some story of an intrigue of Kuragin's in Moscow, to which Natasha listened simply because he had said of her, "very charming." The first act was over. Everyone stood up in the stalls, changed places, and began going out and coming in. Boris came to the Rostovs' box, received their congratulations very simply, and, lifting his eyebrows with an absent-minded smile, gave Natasha and Sonia his fiancée's message, begging them to come to her wedding, and went away. Natasha, with a gay and coquettish smile, talked to him and congratulated him on his approaching marriage. The very Boris she had once been in love with. In the condition of emotional intoxication in which she found herself, everything seemed simple and natural. Ellen sat in her nakedness close by her, and smiled on all alike, and just such a smile Natasha bestowed on Boris. Ellen's box was filled and surrounded on the side of the stalls by the most distinguished and intellectual men, who seemed vying with one another in their desire to show everyone that they knew her. All throughout that entr'acte, Kuragin stood with Dolohov in front of the footlights, staring at the Rostovs' box. Natasha knew he was talking about her, and that afforded her satisfaction. She even turned so that he could see her profile from what she believed to be the most becoming angle. Before the beginning of the second act, she observed in the stalls the figure of Pierre, whom the Rostovs had not seen since their arrival. His face looked sad, and he had grown stouter since Natasha had seen him last. He walked up to the front rows, not noticing anyone. Anatole went up to him and began saying something to him, with a look and a gesture towards the Rostovs' box. Pierre looked pleased at seeing Natasha, and walked hurriedly along the rows of stalls towards their box. Leaning on his elbow, he talked smiling to Natasha for a long while. While she was talking to Pierre, Natasha heard a man's voice speaking in Countess Betsuhov's box, and something told her it was Kuragin. She looked round and met his eyes. He looked her straight in the eyes, almost smiling, with a look of such warmth and admiration that it seemed strange to be so near him. To look at him like that, to be so certain that he admired her, and not to be acquainted with him. In the second act there was scenery representing monuments, and a hole in the drop at the back that represented the moon, and shades were put over the footlights, and trumpets and bassoons began playing, and a number of people came in on the right and on the left, wearing black cloaks. These people began waving their arms, and in their hands they had something of the nature of a dagger. Then some more people ran in, and began dragging away the woman who had been in white, but who was now in a blue dress. They did not drag her away at once. They spent a long while singing with her, but finally they did drag her away, and behind the scenes they struck something metallic 3 times, and then all knelt down and began singing a prayer. All these performances were interrupted several times by the enthusiastic shouts of the spectators. During that act, every time Natasha glanced towards the stalls, she saw Anatole Kuragin, with one arm flung across the back of his chair, staring at her. It pleased her to see that he was so captivated by her, and it never entered her head that there could be anything amiss in it. When the second act was over, Countess Betsuhoff got up, turned towards the Rostovs' box. The whole of her bosom was completely exposed. With her little gloved finger beckoned the old count to her, and, taking no notice of the men who were thronging about her box, began with an amiable smile talking to him. "Oh, do make me acquainted with your charming daughters," she said. "All the town is singing their praises, and I don't know them." Natasha got up and curtsied to the magnificent countess. Natasha was so delighted at the praise from this brilliant beauty that she blushed with pleasure. "I quite want to become a Moscow resident myself," said Ellen. "What a shame of you to bury such pearls in the country." Countess Betsuhoff had some right to her reputation of being a fascinating woman. She could say what she did not think, especially what was flattering, with perfect simplicity and naturalness. "No, dear Count, you must let me help to entertain your daughters, though I'm not here now for very long, nor you either. But I'll do my best to amuse them. I have heard a great deal about you in Petersburg, and wanted to know you," she said to Natasha, with her unvarying, beautiful smile. "I have heard of you too from my page, Trubetskoy. You have heard he is to be married. And from my husband's friend, Bolkonsky, Prince Andrei Bolkonsky," she said, with peculiar emphasis, by which she meant to signify that she knew in what relation he stood to Natasha. She asked that one of the young ladies might be allowed to sit through the rest of the performance in her box, that they might become better acquainted, and Natasha moved into it. In the third act the scene was a palace, in which a great many candles were burning, and pictures were hanging on the walls, representing knights with beards. In the middle stood a man and a woman, probably meant for a king and a queen. The king waved his right hand, and, obviously nervous, sang something very badly, and sat down on a crimson throne. The actress, who had been in white at first and then in blue, was now in nothing but a smock, and had let her hair down. She was standing near the throne, singing something very mournful, addressed to the queen. But the king waved his hand sternly, and from the sides there came in men and women with bare legs, who began dancing all together. Then the violins played very shrilly and merrily. One of the actresses, with thick bare legs and thin arms, leaving the rest, went to the side to set straight her bodice, then walked into the middle of the stage and began skipping into the air and kicking one leg very rapidly with the other. Everyone in the stalls clapped their hands and roared, "Bravo!" Then one man stood alone at one corner of the stage. The cymbals and trumpets struck up more loudly in the orchestra, and this man began leaping very high in the air and rapidly waving his legs. This was Duport, who earned 60,000 a year by this accomplishment. Everyone in the boxes and in the stalls began clapping and shouting with all their might, and the man stood still and began smiling and bowing in all directions. Then other men and women with bare legs danced. Then again the king shouted something to music, and they all began singing. But suddenly a storm came on. Chromatic scales and chords with the diminishing sevenths could be heard in the orchestra, and they all ran off, dragging one of the performers again behind the scenes, and the curtain dropped. Again a fearful uproar of applause arose among the spectators, and all began screaming with rapturous faces, "Duport! Duport! Duport!" Natasha did not now feel this strange. She looked about her with pleasure, smiling joyfully. "Isn't Duport admirable?" said Ellen, turning to her. "Oh, yes," answered Natasha. Chapter 10. In the entr'acte there was a current of chill air in Ellen's box. The door was opened, and Anatole walked in, bending and trying not to brush against anyone. "Allow me to introduce my brother," said Ellen, her eyes shifting uneasily from Natasha to Anatole. Natasha turned her pretty little head towards the handsome adjutant and smiled over her bare shoulder. Anatole, who was as handsome on a closer view as he was from a distance, sat down beside her, and said he had long wished to have this pleasure, ever since the Narishkin's ball, at which he had had the pleasure he had not forgotten of seeing her. Kuragin was far more sensible and straightforward with women than he was in men's society. He talked boldly and simply, and Natasha was strangely and agreeably impressed by finding nothing so formidable in this man, of whom such stories were told, but, on the contrary, seeing on his face the most innocent, merry, and simple-hearted smile. Kuragin asked her what she thought of the performance, and told her that at the last performance Semyonovna had fallen down while she was acting. "And do you know, Countess," said he, suddenly addressing her as though she were an old friend, "we are getting up a costume ball. You ought to take part in it. It will be great fun. They are all assembling at the Karagins. Please do come, really now, huh?" he said. As he said this, he never took his smiling eyes off the face, the neck, the bare arms of Natasha. Natasha knew beyond all doubt that he was fascinated by her. That pleased her, yet she felt for some reason constrained and oppressed in his presence. When she was not looking at him, she felt that he was looking at her shoulders, and she could not help trying to catch his eyes, that he might rather look in her face. But as she looked into his eyes, she felt with horror that, between him and her, there was not that barrier of modest reserve she had always been conscious of between herself and other men. In 5 minutes she felt, she did not know how, that she had come fearfully close to this man. When she turned away, she felt afraid he might take her from behind by her bare arm and kiss her on the neck. They talked of the simplest things, and she felt that they were close as she had never been with any man. Natasha looked round at Ellen and at her father, as though to ask them what was the meaning of it. But Ellen was absorbed in talking to a general, and did not respond to her glance. And her father's eyes said nothing to her but what they always said, "Enjoying yourself? Well, I'm glad then." In one of the moments of awkward silence, during which Anatole gazed calmly and persistently at her, Natasha, to break the silence, asked him how he liked Moscow. Natasha asked this question and blushed as she did so. She was feeling all the while that there she was doing something improper in talking to him. Anatole smiled as though to encourage her. "At first, I didn't like it much, for what is it makes one like a town? It's the pretty women, isn't it? Well, but now I like it awfully," he said, with a meaning look at her. "You'll come to the fancy dress ball, Countess? Do come," he said, and putting his hand out to her bouquet, he said, dropping his voice, "You will be the prettiest. Come, dear Countess, and as a pledge, give me this flower." Natasha did not understand what he was saying, nor did he himself. But she felt that in his uncomprehended words there was some improper intention. She did not know what to say, and turned away as though she had not heard what he said. But as soon as she turned away, she felt that he was here behind her, so close to her. What is he feeling now? Is he confused? Is he angry? Must I set it right? She wondered. She could not refrain from looking round. She glanced straight into his eyes, and his nearness and confidence, and the simple-hearted warmth of his smile vanquished her. She smiled exactly as he did, looking straight into his eyes. And again she felt with horror that no barrier lay between him and her. The curtain rose again. Anatole walked out of the box, serene and good-humored. Natasha went back to her father's box, completely under the spell of the world in which she found herself. All that passed before her eyes now seemed to her perfectly natural. But on the other hand, all previous thoughts of her betrothed, of Princess Maria, of her life in the country, did not once recur to her mind, as though all that belonged to the remote past. In the fourth act there was some sort of devil who sang, waving his arms till the boards were moved away under him, and he sank into the opening. That was all Natasha saw of the fourth act. She felt harassed and excited, and the cause of that excitement was Kuragin, whom she could not help watching. As they came out of the theatre, Anatole came up to them, called their carriage, and helped them into it. As he assisted Natasha, he pressed her arm above the elbow. Natasha, flushed and excited, looked round at him. He gazed at her with flashing eyes and a tender smile. It was only on getting home that Natasha could form any clear idea of what had happened. All at once, remembering Prince Andrei, she was horrified, and at tea, to which they all sat down after the theatre, she groaned aloud, and flushing crimson, ran out of the room. "My God! I am ruined," she said to herself. "How could I sink to such a depth?" she thought. For a long while she sat, with her flushed face hidden in her hands, trying to get a clear idea of what had happened, and unable to grasp either what had happened or what she was feeling. Everything seemed to her dark, obscure, and dreadful. In that immense lighted hall, where Duport had jumped about to music with his bare legs on the damp boards in his short jacket with tinsel, and young ladies and old men, and that Ellen, proudly and serenely smiling in her nakedness, had enthusiastically roared "Bravo!" There, in the wake of that Ellen, all had been clear and simple. But now, alone by herself, it was past comprehending. What does it mean? What is that terror I felt with him? What is the meaning of those gnawings of conscience I am feeling now? She thought. To no one but to her mother at night in bed, Natasha could have talked of what she was feeling. Sonia, she knew, with her strict and single-minded view of things, would either have failed to understand it all, or would have been horrified at the avowal. Natasha, all by herself, had to try and solve the riddle that tormented her. "Am I spoilt for Prince Andrei's love or not?" she asked herself, and with reassuring mockery she answered herself, "What a fool I am to ask such a thing! What has happened to me? Nothing. I have done nothing. I did nothing to lead him on. No one will ever know, and I shall never see him again," she told herself. "So it's plain that nothing has happened, that there's nothing to regret, that Prince Andrei can love me still. But why still? Oh, my God, why isn't he here?" Natasha felt comforted for a moment, but again some instinct told her that though that was all true, and though nothing had happened, yet some instinct told her that all the old purity of her love for Prince Andrei was lost. And again, in her imagination, she went over all her conversation with Kuragin, and saw again the face, the gestures, and the tender smile of that handsome, daring man at the moment when he had pressed her arm. Chapter 11. Anatole Kuragin was staying in Moscow because his father had sent him away from Petersburg, where he had been spending 20,000 a year in hard cash, and running up bills for as much more, and his creditors had been dunning his father. The father informed his son that for the last time he would pay half his debts, but only on condition that he would go away to Moscow, where his father had, by much exertion, secured a post for him as adjutant to the commander-in-chief, and would try finally to make a good match there. He suggested to him either Princess Maria or Julie Karagin. Anatole consented, and went away to Moscow, where he stayed with Pierre. Pierre at first was by no means pleased to receive Anatole, but after a while he got used to his presence, sometimes accompanied him on his carousals, and by way of loans gave him money. As Shinshin had with truth said of him, Anatole had won the hearts of all the Moscow ladies, especially by the nonchalance with which he treated them, and the preference he openly showed for gypsy girls and actresses, with the most prominent of whom, Mademoiselle Georges, he was said to have an intrigue. He never missed a single drinking party at Danilov's, or any other Moscow festivity, spent whole nights drinking, outdoing all the rest, and was at every soiree and ball in the best society. There were rumors of several intrigues of his with Moscow ladies, and at balls he flirted with a few of them. But he fought shy of unmarried ladies, especially the wealthy heiresses, who were most of them plain. He had a good reason for this, of which no one knew but his most intimate friends. He had been for the last 2 years married. 2 years previously, while his regiment had been stationed in Poland, a Polish landowner, by no means well-to-do, had forced Anatole to marry his daughter. Anatole had very shortly afterwards abandoned his wife, and in consideration of a sum of money, which he agreed to send his father-in-law, he was allowed by the latter to pass as a bachelor unmolested. Anatole was very well satisfied with his position, with himself and with other people. He was instinctively and thoroughly convinced that he could not possibly live except just in the way he did live, and that he had never in his life done anything base. He was incapable of considering either how his actions might be judged by others, or what might be the result of this or that action on his part. He was convinced that just as the duck is created, so that it must always live in the water, so he was created by God such that he must spend 30,000 a year, and always take a good position in society. He had such perfect faith in this that, looking at him, others too were persuaded of it, and refused him neither the exalted position in society nor the money, which he borrowed right and left, obviously with no notion of repaying it. He was not a gambler, at least he never greatly cared about winning money at cards. He was not vain. He did not care a straw what people thought of him. Still less could he have been reproached with ambition. Several times he had, to his father's irritation, spoiled his best chances of a career, and he laughed at distinctions of all kinds. He was not stingy, and never refused anyone who asked him for anything. What he loved was dissipation and women, and as, according to his ideas, there was nothing dishonorable in these tastes, and as he was incapable of considering the effect on others of the gratification of his tastes, he believed himself in his heart to be an irreproachable man, felt a genuine contempt for scoundrels and mean persons, and with an untroubled conscience held his head high. Rakes, those masculine Magdalens, have a secret feeling of their own guiltlessness, just as have women Magdalens, founded on the same hope of forgiveness. All will be forgiven her, because she loved much, and all will be forgiven him, because he has enjoyed himself much. Dolokhov had that year reappeared in Moscow after his exile and his Persian adventures. He spent his time in luxury, gambling, and dissipation, renewed his friendship with his old Petersburg comrade, Kuragin, and made use of him for his own objects. Anatole sincerely liked Dolokhov for his cleverness and daring. Dolokhov, for whom Anatole's name and rank and connections were of use in ensnaring wealthy young men into his society for gambling purposes, made use of Kuragin without letting him feel it, and was amused by him too. Apart from interested motives, for which he needed Anatole, the process itself of controlling another man's will was an enjoyment, a habit, and a necessity for Dolokhov. Natasha had made a great impression on Kuragin. At supper, after the theater, he analyzed to Dolokhov, with the manner of a connoisseur, the points of her arms, her shoulders, her foot, and her hair, and announced his intention of getting up a flirtation with her. What might come of such a flirtation, Anatole was incapable of considering, and had no notion, as he never had a notion, of what would come of any of his actions. What might come of such a flirtation, Anatole was incapable of considering, and had no notion, as he never had a notion, of what would come of any of his actions. "She's pretty, my lad, but she's not for us," Dolokhov said to him. "I'll tell my sister to ask her to dinner," said Anatole. "Huh?" "You'd better wait till she's married." "You know I adore little girls," said Anatole. "They're all confusion in a minute." "You've come to grief once already over a little girl," said Dolokhov, who knew of Anatole's marriage. "Beware." "Well, one can't do it twice, huh?" said Anatole, laughing good-humoredly. Chapter 12. The next day, the Rostovs did not go anywhere, and no one came to see them. Maria Dmitrievna had a discussion with Natasha's father, which she kept secret from her. Natasha guessed they were talking of the old prince and making some plan, and she felt worried and humiliated by it. Every minute she expected Prince Andrei, and twice that day she sent a man to Vozdvizhenka to inquire whether he had not arrived. He had not arrived. She felt more dreary now than during the first days in Moscow. To her impatience and pining for him, there were now added the unpleasant recollections of her interview with Princess Maria and the old prince, and a vague dread and restlessness, of which she did not know the cause. She was continually fancying either that he would never come, or that something would happen to her before he came. She could not brood calmly for long hours over his image by herself, as she had done before. As soon as she began to think of him, her memory of him was mingled with the recollection of the old prince and Princess Maria, and of the theatre, and of Kuragin. Again the question presented itself whether she had not been to blame, whether she had not broken her faith to Prince Andrei. And again she found herself going over in the minutest detail every word, every gesture, every shade in the play of expression on the face of that man, who had known how to awaken in her a terrible feeling that was beyond her comprehension. In the eyes of those about her, Natasha seemed livelier than usual, but she was far from being as serene and happy as before. On Sunday morning, Maria Dmitrievna invited her guests to go to Mass to her parish church of Uspenia on Mogiltse. "I don't like those fashionable churches," she said, obviously priding herself on her independence of thought. "God is the same everywhere. Our parish priest is an excellent man, and conducts the service in a suitable way, so that is all as it should be, and his deacon too. Is there something holier about it when there are concerts in the choir? I don't like it. It's simply self-indulgence." Maria Dmitrievna liked Sundays, and knew how to keep them as holidays. Her house was always all scrubbed out and cleaned on Saturday. Neither she nor her servants did any work, and everyone wore holiday dress and went to service. There were additional dishes at the mistress's dinner, and the servants had vodka and roast goose, or a suckling pig at theirs. But in nothing in the whole house was the holiday so marked as in the broad, severe face of Maria Dmitrievna, which on that day wore a never-varying expression of solemnity. When after service they were drinking coffee in the drawing-room, where the covers had been removed from the furniture, the servant announced that the carriage was ready, and Maria Dmitrievna, dressed in her best shawl in which she paid calls, rose with a stern air and announced that she was going to call on Prince Nikolai Andreevich Bolkonsky to ask for an explanation of his conduct about Natasha. After Maria Dmitrievna had gone, a dressmaker waited upon the Rostovs from Madame Chalmey, and Natasha, very glad of a diversion, went into a room adjoining the drawing-room, and, shutting the door between, began trying on her new dresses. Just as she had put on a bodice basted together with the sleeves not yet tacked in, and was turning her head to look at the fit of the back in the looking-glass, she caught the sound of her father's voice in the drawing-room in eager conversation with another voice, a woman's voice, which made her flush red. It was the voice of Ellen. Before Natasha had time to take off the bodice she was trying on, the door opened, and Countess Betsuhov walked into the room, wearing a dark heliotrope velvet gown with a high collar, and beaming with a good-natured and friendly smile. "Oh, my enchantress," she said to the blushing Natasha. "Charming. No, this is really beyond anything, Count," she said to Count Ilya Andreevich, who had followed her in. "How can you be in Moscow and go nowhere? No, I won't let you off. This evening we have Mademoiselle Georges giving a recitation, and a few people are coming. And if you don't bring your lovely girls, who are much prettier than Mademoiselle Georges, I give up knowing you. My husband's not here. He has gone away to thru, or I should have sent him for you. You must come, you positively must, before 9 o'clock. She nodded to the dressmaker, who knew her, and was curtsying respectfully, and seated herself in a low chair beside the looking-glass, draping the folds of her velvet gown picturesquely about her. She kept up a flow of good-humored and light-hearted chatter, and repeatedly expressed her enthusiastic admiration of Natasha's beauty. She looked through her dresses and admired them, spoke with admiration, too, of a new dress of her own, of metallic gas, which she had received from Paris, and advised Natasha to have one like it. "But anything suits you, my charmer," she declared. The smile of pleasure never left Natasha's face. She felt happy and, as it were, blossoming out under the praises of this charming Countess Betsuhov, who had seemed to her before a lady so unapproachable and dignified, and was now being so kind to her. Natasha's spirits rose, and she felt almost in love with this handsome and good-natured woman. Ellen, for her part, was genuine in her admiration of Natasha, and in her desire to make her enjoy herself. Anatole had begged her to throw him with Natasha, and it was with that object she had come to the Rostovs. The idea of throwing her brother and Natasha together amused her. Although Ellen had once owed Natasha a grudge for carrying off Boris from her in Petersburg, she thought no more of that now, and with all her heart wished Natasha nothing but good. As she was leaving the Rostovs, she drew her protégé aside. "My brother was dining with me yesterday. We half died with laughing at him. He won't eat, and does nothing but sigh for you, my charmer. He is madly, madly in love with you, my dear." Natasha flushed crimson on hearing those words. How she blushes, my pretty," Ellen went on. "You must be sure to come. If you do love someone, it is not a reason to cloister yourself. Even if you are betrothed, I am sure your betrothed would have preferred you to go into society rather than to languish in ennui." "So then she knows I am engaged. So then they with her husband, with Pierre, with that good Pierre, talked and laughed about it, so that it means nothing." And again, under Ellen's influence, what had struck her before as terrible seemed to her simple and natural. And she, such a grande dame, is so kind, and obviously she likes me with all her heart, thought Natasha. And why not enjoy myself, thought Natasha, gazing at Ellen with wide-open, wondering eyes. Marya Dmitrievna came back to dinner silent and serious, having evidently been defeated by the old prince. She was too much agitated by the conflict she had been through to be able to describe the interview. To the Count's inquiries, she replied that everything had been all right, and she would tell him about it next day. On hearing of the visit of Countess Betsuhov and the invitation for the evening, Marya Dmitrievna said, "I don't care to associate with Countess Betsuhov, and I don't advise you to, but still, since you have promised, better go. It will divert your mind," she added, addressing Natasha. Chapter 13. Count Ilya Andreich took his 2 girls to the Countess Betsuhov's. There were a good many people assembled there, but Natasha hardly knew any of the persons present. Count Ilya Andreich observed with dissatisfaction that almost all the company consisted of men or of ladies notorious for the freedom of their behavior. Mademoiselle Georges was standing in one corner of the room, surrounded by young men. There were several Frenchmen present, and among them Métivier, who had been a constant visitor at Countess Betsuhov's ever since her arrival in Moscow. Count Ilya Andreich made up his mind not to take a hand at cards, not to leave his daughter's side, and to get away as soon as Mademoiselle Georges's performance was over. Anatole was at the door, unmistakably on the lookout for the Rostovs. At once greeting the Count, he went up to Natasha and followed her in. As soon as Natasha saw him, the same feeling came upon her as at the theater, the feeling of gratified vanity at his admiration of her, and terror at the absence of any moral barrier between them. Ellen gave Natasha a delighted welcome, and was loud in her admiration of her loveliness and her dress. Soon after their arrival, Mademoiselle Georges went out of the room to change her dress. In the drawing-room, chairs were being set in rows, and people began to sit down. Anatole moved a chair for Natasha, and would have sat down by her, but the Count, who was keeping his eye on Natasha, took the seat beside her. Anatole sat down behind. Mademoiselle Georges, with bare, fat, dimpled arms, and a red scarf flung over one shoulder, came into the empty space left for her between the chairs, and threw herself into an unnatural pose. An enthusiastic whisper was audible. Mademoiselle Georges scanned her audience with stern and gloomy eyes, and began reciting French verses, describing her guilty love for her son. In places she raised her voice, in places she dropped to a whisper, solemnly lifting her head. In places she broke off, and hissed with rolling eyes. Exquisite, divine, marvelous, was heard on all sides. Natasha gazed at the fat actress, but she heard nothing, saw nothing, and understood nothing of what was passing before her. She felt nothing, but that she was borne away again irrevocably into that strange and senseless world so remote from her old world, a world in which there was no knowing what was good and what was bad, what was sensible and what was senseless. Behind her was sitting Anatole, and conscious of his nearness, she was in frightened expectation of something. After the first monologue, all the company rose and surrounded Mademoiselle Georges, expressing their admiration. "How handsome she is," said Natasha to her father, as he got up with the rest and moved through the crowd to the actress. "I don't think so, looking at you," said Anatole, following Natasha. He said this at a moment when no one but she could hear him. "You are charming. From the moment I first saw you, I have not ceased—" come along, Natasha," said the Count, turning back for his daughter. "How pretty she is!" Natasha, saying nothing, went up to her father, and gazed at him with eyes of inquiring wonder. After several recitations in different styles, Mademoiselle Georges went away, and Countess Betsuhov invited all the company to the great hall. The Count would have taken leave, but Ellen besought him not to spoil her improvised ball. The Rostovs stayed on. Anatole asked Natasha for a waltz, and during the waltz, squeezing her waist and her hand, he told her she was bewitching and that he loved her. During the écossaise, which she danced again with Kuragin, when they were left alone, Anatole said nothing to her. He simply looked at her. Natasha was in doubt whether she had not dreamed what he had said to her during the waltz. At the end of the first figure, he pressed her hand again. Natasha lifted her frightened eyes to his face, but there was an expression of such assurance and warmth in his fond look and smile that she could not, as she looked at him, say what she had to say to him. She dropped her eyes. "Don't say such things to me. I am betrothed, and I love another man," she articulated rapidly. She glanced at him. Anatole was neither disconcerted nor mortified at what she had said. "Don't talk to me of that. What is that to me?" he said. "I tell you I am mad with love of you. Is it my fault that you are fascinating? It's for us to begin." Natasha, eager and agitated, looked about her with wide-open, frightened eyes, and seemed to be enjoying herself more than usual. She scarcely grasped anything that happened that evening. They danced the écossaise and grandfather. Her father suggested their going, and she begged to stay longer. Wherever she was, and with whomsoever she was speaking, she felt his eyes upon her. Then she remembered that she had asked her father's permission to go into a dressing-room to rearrange her dress, that Ellen had followed her, had talked to her, laughing, of her brother's passion, and that in the little divan-room she had been met again by Anatole, that Ellen had somehow vanished. They were left alone, and Anatole, taking her by the hand, had said in a tender voice, I can't come to see you. But is it possible that I shall never see you? I love you madly. Can I never? And barring her way, he brought his face close to hers. His large, shining, masculine eyes were so close to her eyes that she could see nothing but those eyes. Natalie, his voice whispered interrogatively, and her hands were squeezed till it hurt. Natalie. I don't understand. I have nothing to say, was the answer in her eyes. Burning lips were pressed to her lips, and at the same instant she felt herself set free again, and caught the sound of Ellen's steps and rustling gown in the room again. Natasha looked round towards Ellen. Then, red and trembling, she glanced at him with alarmed inquiry, and moved towards the door. One word, just one word for God's sake, Anatole was saying. She stopped. She so wanted him to say that word, that would have explained to her what had happened, and to which she could have found an answer. Natalie, one word, one, he kept repeating, plainly not knowing what to say, and he repeated it till Ellen reached them. Ellen went back with Natasha to the drawing-room. The Rostovs went away without staying to supper. When she got home, Natasha did not sleep all night. She was tortured by the insoluble question, which did she love, Anatole or Prince Andrei? Prince Andrei she did love. She remembered clearly how great her love was for him. But she loved Anatole too. Of that there was no doubt. Else could all that have happened, she thought. If after that I could answer with a smile to his smile at parting, if I could sink to that, it means that I fell in love with him from the first minute. So he must be kind, noble, and good, or I could not help loving him. What am I to do, if I love him and the other too? She said to herself, and was unable to find an answer to those terrible questions. Chapter 14. The morning came with daily cares and bustle. Everyone got up and began to move about and to talk. The dressmakers came again. Again Marya Dmitrievna went out, and they were summoned to tea. Natasha kept uneasily looking round at everyone with wide-open eyes, as though she wanted to intercept every glance turned upon her. She did her utmost to seem exactly as usual. After luncheon, it was always her best time, Marya Dmitrievna seated herself in her own armchair, and drew Natasha and the old Count to her. Well, my friends, I have thought the whole matter over now, and I'll tell you my advice, she began. Yesterday, as you know, I was at Prince Bolkonsky's. Well, I had a talk with him. He thought fit to scream at me. But there's no screaming me down. I had it all out with him. Well, but what does he mean? Asked the Count. He's crazy. He won't hear of it, and there's no more to be said. As it is, we have given this poor girl worry enough, said Marya Dmitrievna, and my advice to you is to make an end of it and go home to Otradnoy, and there to wait. Oh, no, cried Natasha. Yes, to go home, said Marya Dmitrievna, and to wait there. If your betrothed comes here now, there'll be no escaping a quarrel. But alone here, he'll have it all out with the old man, and then come on to you. Count Ilya Andreich approved of this suggestion, and at once saw all the sound sense of it. If the old man were to come round, then it would be better to visit him at Moscow or Bleak Hills later on. If not, then the wedding, against his will, could only take place at Otradnoy. And that's perfectly true, said he. I regret indeed that I ever went to see him and took her too, said the Count. No, why regret it? Being here, you could do no less than show him respect. If he wouldn't receive it, that's his affair, said Marya Dmitrievna, searching for something in her reticule.
And now the trousseau's ready, what have you to wait for? What is not ready, I'll send after you. Though I'm sorry to lose you, still the best thing is for you to go, and God be with you." Finding what she was looking for in her reticule, she handed it to Natasha. It was a letter from Princess Marya. "She writes to you. How worried she is, poor thing. She is afraid you might think she does not like you." "Well, she doesn't like me," said Natasha. "Nonsense, don't say so," cried Marya Dmitrievna. "I won't take anyone's word for that. I know she doesn't like me," said Natasha boldly as she took the letter, and there was a look of cold and angry resolution in her face that made Marya Dmitrievna look at her more closely and frown. "Don't you answer me like that, my good girl," she said. "If I say so, it's the truth. Write an answer to her." Natasha made no reply, and went to her own room to read Princess Marya's letter. Princess Marya wrote that she was in despair at the misunderstanding that had arisen between them. Whatever her father's feelings might be, wrote Princess Marya, she begged Natasha to believe that she could not fail to love her, as the girl chosen by her brother, for whose happiness she was ready to make any sacrifice. "Do not believe, though," she wrote, "that my father is ill-disposed to you. He is an old man, and an invalid, for whom one must make excuses. But he is good-hearted and generous, and will come to love the woman who makes his son happy." Princess Marya begged Natasha, too, to fix a time when she might see her again. After reading the letter, Natasha sat down to the writing-table to answer it. "Dear Princess," she began, writing rapidly and mechanically in French, and there she stopped. What more could she write, after what had happened the day before? Yes, all that had happened, and now everything was different, she thought, sitting before the letter she had begun. Must I refuse him? Must I really? That's awful. And to avoid these horrible thoughts, she went into Sonia and began looking through embroidery designs with her. After dinner, Natasha went to her own room and took up Princess Marya's letter again. Can everything be over? She thought. Can all this have happened so quickly, and have destroyed all that went before? She recalled in all its past strength her love for Prince Andrei, and at the same time she felt that she loved Kuragin. She vividly pictured herself the wife of Prince Andrei, of her happiness with him, called up the picture she had so often dwelt on in her imagination, and at the same time, all aglow with emotion, she recalled every detail of her interview the previous evening with Anatole. Why could not that be as well? She wondered sometimes in complete bewilderment. It's only so that I could be perfectly happy. As it is, I have to choose, and without either of them I can't be happy. There's one thing, she thought, to tell Prince Andrei what has happened, to hide it from him, are equally impossible. But with him, nothing is spoiled. But can I part forever from the happiness of Prince Andrei's love, which I have been living on for so long? Madame, whispered a maid, coming into the room with a mysterious air, a man told me to give you this. The girl gave her a letter. Only for Christ's sake, said the girl, as Natasha, without thinking, mechanically broke the seal and began reading a love letter from Anatole, of which she did not understand a word, but understood only that it was a letter from him, from the man whom she loved. Yes, she loved him. Otherwise, how could what had happened have happened? How could a love letter from him be in her hand? With trembling hands, Natasha held that passionate love letter, composed for Anatole by Dolohov, and as she read it, she found in it echoes of all that it seemed to her she was feeling herself. Since yesterday evening, my fate is sealed, to be loved by you or to die. There is nothing else left for me, the letter began. Then he wrote that he knew her relations would never give her to him, to Anatole, that there were secret reasons for that, which he could only reveal to her alone, but that if she loved him, she had but to utter the word yes, and no human force could hinder their happiness. Love would conquer all. He could capture her and bear her away to the ends of the earth. Yes, yes, I love him, thought Natasha, reading the letter over for the 20th time, and finding some special deep meaning in every word. That evening, Marya Dmitrievna was going to the Arharovs, and proposed taking the young ladies with her. Natasha pleaded a headache and stayed at home. Chapter 15. On returning late in the evening, Sonia went into Natasha's room, and, to her surprise, found her, not undressed, asleep on the sofa. On the table near her, Anatole's letter lay open. Sonia picked up the letter and began to read it. She read it, and looked at Natasha asleep, seeking in her face some explanation of what she had read, and not finding it. Her face was quiet, gentle, and happy. Clutching at her own chest to keep herself from choking, Sonia, pale and shaking with horror and emotion, sat down in a low chair and burst into tears. How was it I saw nothing? How can it have gone so far? Can she have ceased loving Prince Andrei? And how could she have let this Kuragin go as far as this? He's a deceiver and a villain, that's clear. What will Nikolenka, dear noble Nikolenka, do when he hears of it? So that was the meaning of her excited, determined, unnatural face the day before yesterday, and today, thought Sonia. But it's impossible that she can care for him. Most likely she opened the letter not knowing from whom it was. Most likely she feels insulted by it. She's not capable of doing such a thing. Sonia dried her tears and went up to Natasha, carefully scrutinizing her face again. Natasha, she said, hardly audibly. Natasha waked up and saw Sonia. Ah, you have come back? And with the decision and tenderness common at the moment of awakening, she embraced her friend. But noticing embarrassment in Sonia's face, her face too expressed embarrassment and suspicion. Sonia, you have read the letter? She said. Yes, said Sonia softly. Natasha smiled ecstatically. No, Sonia, I can't help it, she said. I can't keep it secret from you any longer. You know we love each other. Sonia, darling, he writes. Sonia. Sonia gazed with wide-open eyes at Natasha, as though unable to believe her ears. But Bolkonsky, she said. Oh, Sonia. Oh, if you could only know how happy I am, said Natasha. You don't know what love... But, Natasha, you can't mean that all that is over? Natasha looked with her big, wide eyes at Sonia, as though not understanding her question. Are you breaking it off with Prince Andrei, then? Said Sonia. Oh, you don't understand. Don't talk nonsense. Listen, said Natasha, with momentary annoyance. No, I can't believe it, repeated Sonia. I don't understand it. What? For a whole year you have been loving one man, and all at once... Why, you have only seen him 3 times. Natasha, I can't believe you. You're joking. In 3 days to forget everything, and like this... 3 days, said Natasha. It seems to me as though I had loved him for 100 years. It seems to me that I have never loved anyone before him. You can't understand that. Sonia, stay. Sit here. Natasha hugged and kissed her. I have been told of its happening, and no doubt you have heard of it too. But it's only now that I have felt such love. It's not what I have felt before. As soon as I saw him, I felt that he was my sovereign, and I was his slave, and that I could not help loving him. Yes, his slave. Whatever he bids me, I shall do. You don't understand that. What am I to do? What am I to do, Sonia? said Natasha, with a blissful and frightened face. "But only think what you are doing," said Sonia. "I can't leave it like this. These secret letters. How could you let him go so far as that?" she said, with a horror and aversion she could with difficulty conceal. "I have told you," answered Natasha, "that I have no will. How is it you don't understand that? I love him." "Then I can't let it go on like this. I shall tell about it," cried Sonia, with a burst of tears. "What? For God's sake!" "If you tell, you are my enemy," said Natasha. "You want to make me miserable, and you want us to be separated." On seeing Natasha's alarm, Sonia wept tears of shame and pity for her friend. "But what has passed between you?" she asked. "What has he said to you? Why doesn't he come to the house?" Natasha made no answer to her question. "For God's sake, Sonia, don't tell anyone, don't torture me," Natasha implored her. "Remember that it doesn't do to meddle in such matters. I have told you." "But why this secrecy? Why doesn't he come to the house?" Sonia persisted. "Why doesn't he ask for your hand straight out? Prince Andrei, you know, gave you complete liberty, if it really is so. But I can't believe in it. Natasha, have you thought what the secret reasons can be?" Natasha looked with wondering eyes at Sonia. Evidently it was the first time that question had presented itself to her, and she did not know how to answer it. "What the reasons are, I don't know. But there must be reasons." Sonia sighed and shook her head distrustfully. "If there were reasons," she was beginning, but Natasha, divining her doubts, interrupted her in dismay. "Sonia, you mustn't doubt of him. You mustn't. You mustn't. Do you understand?" she cried. "Does he love you?" "Does he love me?" repeated Natasha, with a smile of compassion for her friend's dullness of comprehension. "Why, you have read his letter, haven't you? You've seen him." "But if he is a dishonorable man?" "He? A dishonorable man? If only you knew," said Natasha. "If he is an honorable man, he ought either to explain his intentions or to give up seeing you. And if you won't do that, I will do it. I'll write to him." "I'll tell Papa," said Sonia resolutely. "But I can't live without him," cried Natasha. "Natasha, I don't understand you. And what are you saying? Think of your father, of Nikolenka." "I don't care for anyone. I don't love anyone but him. How dare you say he's dishonorable? Don't you know that I love him?" cried Natasha. "Sonia, go away. I don't want to quarrel with you. Go away, for God's sake. Go away. You see how wretched I am," cried Natasha angrily, in a voice of repressed irritation and despair. Sonia burst into sobs and ran out of the room. Natasha went to the table, and without a moment's reflection wrote that answer to Princess Maria, which she had been unable to write all the morning. In her letter she told Princess Maria briefly that all misunderstandings between them were at an end, as taking advantage of the generosity of Prince Andrei, who had at parting given her full liberty, she begged her to forget everything and forgive her if she had been in fault in any way, but she could not be his wife. It all seemed to her so easy, so simple, and so clear at that moment. The Rostovs were to return to the country on Friday, but on Wednesday the Count went with the intending purchaser to his estate near Moscow. On the day the Count left, Sonia and Natasha were invited to a big dinner party at Julie Karagin's, and Maria Dmitrievna took them. At that dinner Natasha met Anatole again, and Sonia noticed that Natasha said something to him, trying not to be overheard, and was all through the dinner more excited than before. When they got home, Natasha was the first to enter upon the conversation with Sonia that her friend was expecting. Well, Sonia, you said all sorts of silly things about him, Natasha began in a meek voice, the voice in which children speak when they want to be praised for being good. I have had it all out with him today. Well, what did he say? Well, come, what did he say? Natasha, I'm so glad you're not angry with me. Tell me everything, all the truth. What did he say? Natasha sank into thought. Oh, Sonia, if you knew him as I do. He asked me what promise I had given Bolkonsky. He was so glad that I was free to refuse him. Sonia sighed dejectedly. But you haven't refused Bolkonsky, have you? She said. Oh, perhaps I have refused him. Perhaps it's all at an end with Bolkonsky. Why do you think so ill of me? I don't think anything. Only I don't understand this. Wait a little, Sonia. You will understand it all. You will see the sort of man he is. Don't think ill of me or of him. I don't think ill of anyone. I like everyone, and am sorry for everyone. But what am I to do? Sonia would not let herself be won over by the affectionate tone Natasha took with her. The softer and the more ingratiating Natasha's face became, the more serious and stern became the face of Sonia. Natasha, she said, you asked me not to speak to you, and I haven't spoken. Now you have begun yourself. Natasha, I don't trust him. Why this secrecy? Again, interrupted Natasha. Natasha, I am afraid for you. What is there to be afraid of? I am afraid you will be ruined, said Sonia resolutely, herself horrified at what she was saying. Natasha's face expressed anger again. Then I will be ruined. I will. I'll hasten to my ruin. It's not your business. It's not you, but I will suffer for it. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I hate you. Natasha! Sonia appealed to her in dismay. I hate you. I hate you, and you're my enemy forever. Natasha ran out of the room. Natasha avoided Sonia, and did not speak to her again. With the same expression of agitated wonder and guilt, she wandered about the rooms, taking up first one occupation and then another, and throwing them aside again at once. Hard as it was for Sonia, she kept watch over her friend, and never let her out of her sight. On the day before that fixed for the Count's return, Sonia noticed that Natasha sat all the morning at the drawing-room window, as though expecting someone, and that she made a sign to an officer who passed by, whom Sonia took to be Anatole. Sonia began watching her friend even more attentively, and she noticed that all dinner-time and in the evening, Natasha was in a strange and unnatural state, unlike herself. She made irrelevant replies to questions asked her, began sentences and did not finish them, and laughed at everything. After tea, Sonia saw the maid timidly waiting for her to pass at Natasha's door. She let her go in, and listening at the door, found out that another letter had been given her. And all at once it was clear to Sonia that Natasha had some dreadful plan for that evening. Sonia knocked at her door. Natasha would not let her in. She is going to run away with him, thought Sonia. She is capable of anything. There was something particularly piteous and determined in her face today. She cried as she said goodbye to Uncle. Sonia remembered. Yes, it's certain. She's going to run away with him. But what am I to do? Wondered Sonia, recalling now all the signs that so clearly betokened some dreadful resolution on Natasha's part. The Count is not here. What am I to do? Write to Kuragin, demanding an explanation from him? But who is to make him answer? Write to Pierre, as Prince Andrei asked me to do in case of trouble? But perhaps she really has refused Bolkonsky. She sent off a letter to Princess Maria yesterday. Uncle is not here. To tell Marya Dmitrievna, who had such faith in Natasha, seemed to Sonia a fearful step to take. But one way or another, thought Sonia, standing in the dark corridor, now or never, the time has come for me to show that I am mindful of all the benefits I have received from their family, and that I love Nikolai. No, if I have to go 3 nights together without sleep, I won't leave this corridor, and I will prevent her passing by force, and not let disgrace come upon their family, she thought. Chapter 16. Anatole had lately moved into Dolohov's quarters. The plan for the abduction of Natasha Rostov had been all planned out and prepared several days before by Dolohov, and on the day when Sonia had listened at Natasha's door and resolved to protect her, that plan was to be put into execution. Natasha had promised to come out to Kuragin at the back entrance at 10 o'clock in the evening. Kuragin was to get her into a sledge that was to be all ready with 3 horses in it, and to drive her off 60 versts from Moscow to the village of Kamenka, where an unfrocked priest was in readiness to perform a marriage ceremony over them. At Kamenka, a relay of horses was to be in readiness, which was to take them as far as the Warsaw Road, and thence they were to hasten abroad by means of post-horses. Anatole had a passport and an order for post-horses, and 10,000 rubles borrowed from his sister, and 10,000 more raised by the assistance of Dolohov. The 2 witnesses of the mock marriage ceremony, Hrostikov, once a petty official, a man of whom Dolohov made use at cards, and Makarin, a retired hussar, a weak and good-natured man, whose devotion to Kuragin was unbounded, were sitting over their tea in the outer room. In Dolohov's big study, decorated from the walls to the ceiling with Persian rugs, bearskins, and weapons, Dolohov was sitting in a traveling tunic and high boots, in front of an open bureau, on which lay accounts and bundles of banknotes. Anatole, in an unbuttoned uniform, was walking to and fro from the room where the witnesses were sitting, through the study, into a room behind, where his French valet, with some other servants, was packing up the last of his belongings. Dolohov was reckoning up money and noting down sums. "Well," he said, "you will have to give Khostikov 2,000. "Well, give it him then," said Anatole. "Makarka now," their name for Makarin, "he would go through fire and water for you with nothing to gain by it." "Well, here then, our accounts are finished," said Dolohov, showing him the paper. "That's all right?" "Yes, of course it's all right," said Anatole, evidently not attending to Dolohov, and looking straight before him with a smile that never left his face. Dolohov shut the bureau with a slam, and turned to Anatole with an ironical smile. "But I say, you drop it all. There's still time," he said. "Idiot," said Anatole. "Leave off talking rubbish. If only you knew. Devil only know what this means to me."